You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. Phil, it's a pleasure as always. How are you, man?
You know, I am doing great, Matt. And when I hear your voice, you did throw me for a loop. I'm thinking, is it football season?
Is it September?
Yeah.
When it turns to September, man, I'll be out in Las Vegas getting ready for LSU and USC. You have an early thought on that one?
I've got the game. I know LSU's about a 6.5 point favorite in the game. I think it's going to be a close game. I consider that going to be a tight game. I like what USC's done defensively this year, bringing in Lynn as the defense coordinator and some numerous players. And I think with Moss at QB, I think they're fine. Lincoln Riley knows offense. That's going to be a heck of a game. I'm looking forward to watching that one.
You know, it's so interesting, Phil, as we've talked this offseason about LSU and USC. They feel almost like mirror images, right? Replacing a Heisman-winning quarterback, really bad defensively a year ago, new defensive coordinator coming in. When you look at LSU, given all that turnover and how bad the defense was, how do you start to piece together your preseason thoughts and projections on this LSU team?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a much different looking LSU team than last year. Start with the offense. Offensively last year they could rely on Daniels running for over 1,000 yards. This year, I think we're going to see the running backs run the football more. I mean, last year the running backs had about 280 carries. This year, probably 380 carries. So a lot more running back runs. I look for Nussmeier to be more of a pocket passer this year. They do have the offensive line, but they lose a couple of number one draft picks at wide receiver, although LSU always replaces their wide receivers. I'm interested to see how these new running backs do. Now, defensively, I think there will be improvement. I mean, let's face it. Last year, LSU was number 112 in the country, allowing opponents 83 yards or 41 yards per game above their season average, but they've got too much talent on the defensive side of the ball to be like that. As you mentioned, a new defensive coordinator. I like Blake Baker. Comes over from Missouri, where I thought he did a great job. So I think it's going to be a much different looking LSU team. Not as high scoring of games. Remember the last time they lost to Heisman Trophy winner, they went from averaging 48 points per game down to 32. I don't think we'll see that big of a drop off, but I do think we'll see a drop off offensively, but an improvement probably by about the same amount defensively. So lower scoring games. It's going to be really interesting watching this LSU team this year.
You know, Phil, and obviously it's in an expanded SEC. So you bring in Oklahoma and Texas, and man, Texas seems to have the easier draw. Oklahoma's schedule is just brutal. Texas is probably a more talented team as well. There's a lot of teams with conference realignment, Phil, all across the country, but let's focus on OU and Texas and how you think they fare year one in the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, and I think schedule-wise it makes them appear different. In fact, you'll give you an example, Matt. I've got Oklahoma number 7 in my power poll coming into the season. They've got one of the best defenses in the country. When you take a look at the Sooners, it's year 3 for Brett Venables, and Venables has a complex defense. These guys all know it. It's a veteran unit. They'll have one of the best defenses. I like Jackson Arnold. I think he's going to have a good year at quarterback. There are question marks on the offensive line, but I've rated him number 7 overall in my power poll. However, I've got him number 20 just for the reason you touched on. They play the toughest schedule in the SEC. You know, they only have 3 SEC home games this year because Texas is at a neutral site, and they draw Texas, Alabama, Ole Miss, LSU, Missouri. You look at some of their home games, Alabama, Tennessee. This is a rugged schedule for Oklahoma. They'll coast through the non-conference, but once they get to conference play, look out, and that's why I have them at number 20. And it's opposite schedule-wise for Texas this year. Now, Texas, I have number 4 in my power poll, and I think they have the best quarterback room in the country with Quinn Ewers backed by Arch Manning. They've got one of the top offensive lines in the country this year. I rated number 2, and they've got a top-notch defense, and they also are number 2 in special teams. Then you look at their schedule. They avoid a lot of the big boys. The only big boys they play are Georgia and Oklahoma. There's no Alabama. There's no Ole Miss. There's no LSU. There's no Missouri on the schedule. They only have 3 true SEC road games this year, and that's at Vanderbilt. That's a win. Ooh. At Arkansas, they'll be favored. At Texas A&M, big rivalry game at the end of the year. Those are their road games. So the rest of them are at home, including Georgia. I've got Texas playing for the Big 12 title, partly due to the talent and partly due to the schedule.
Phil, old habits going to die hard. Texas playing for the SEC title. You think they play Georgia?
I do.
Okay.
And when you look at Georgia, they are, to me, the most complete team and the deepest team out there. They go 3 deep at basically every position. There's a lot of positions where their third stringer would probably start for a lot of other teams. They've got Carson Beck back at quarterback. They got my number 1 rated offensive line. They've got one of the top defensive lines and defenses in the country, and they also are strong on special teams at number 3. Now, I think Georgia probably loses a game in the regular season. I mean, they have to play Bama, Texas, and Mississippi all on the road. Now, I'll give you an example. LSU plays 3 tough teams in the SEC, but they get them all at home in Death Valley, in Oklahoma, Alabama, and Mississippi. So schedule-wise, they're probably going to drop a game somewhere, but I think overall talent-wise, and if they get to the SEC championship game, which I think they will, I think they win it. Who knows? We may see Georgia play Texas 3 times this year.
That would be wild. That's such, you could play regular season, conference championship game, and then the playoff. Phil, that would be NFL-esque. I guess I hadn't thought about that. That's why you're the best. He's on Twitter at PhilSteele042. Of course, PhilSteele.com, STEELE, PhilSteele.com. Phil, I would also love a thought. I think we roundly all agree that Georgia, Texas should be a playoff team. And if they're not, something went terribly wrong. The big question, though, is how many more SEC teams can earn an at-large berth? I mean, are we looking at 3 or 4 SEC teams in the playoffs? When you think of it, where does that typically settle?
I would put my low number at 4. I really think at least 4 teams make the playoff. I believe the 4th place SEC team gets in over the 2nd place Big 12 or the 2nd place ACC team. You probably have the ACC champ, the Big 12 champ, Notre Dame, and the group of 5. So that's 4 spots taken, and that leaves you 8 spots. And I could see 4 or 5 for the SEC this year. And I think the low is 4, the high is 5.
Wow. Okay. If it's Texas and Georgia, how do you rate the next level? And I guess I'd negligent if I don't ask what your thoughts on Alabama now post Nick Saban and how they'd be.
Yeah, and I've got Bama 3 and a legitimate SEC contender, and that differs from what happened when Nick Saban announced the news he's leaving in January, and a bunch of those players hit the portal. I was like, you know what, we might be in for a rebuilding year. But after going over the team with Coach DeBoer, much like I did with his team with Washington last year, went over the entire team with him. I look at this Bama team, and I love what he's brought in since he got there. He brought in Damani Jackson from USC at cornerback, Keon Saab from Michigan at safety, as well as some other players defensively. He brings in the Lou Groza Award winner at kicker and Graham Nicholson. They had snap problems last year. If you watch Bama, you saw a lot of bad snaps. Parker Brailsford comes in from Washington, the Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line at center. Snap problem solved. Brings in Bernard, a wide receiver from Washington, and he's got Jalen Milroe back. So this is really a complete team. And going over the rosters with them, last year's Washington, which played in the national title game, and this year's Alabama, I think he's got a better roster this year than he had last year. This guy's 104-12 as a head coach. I was highly skeptical of whoever they were going to bring in to fill those massive shoes of Nick Saban, maybe the greatest coach of all time. And I think they did a tremendous job and hit a home run with Kalen DeBoer.
It'll be interesting to see what DeBoer and the players have to say next week when we're in Dallas at SEC Football Media Days. But that is arguably the most intriguing storyline in all of college football, obviously, is DeBoer replacing Nick Saban. Couple more for you, Phil. I've learned this lesson doing this enough with you. I got to ask you who you think, when you look at those preseason win totals, are overvalued and undervalued, because you got a long history of nailing these. So let's take them one at a time. What team are the odds makers maybe a little too high on that you think is a little overvalued?
Well, can I go off the board on this one?
Absolutely.
I'm going to go off the board and pick Georgia State at 4.5. Georgia State had a really tough situation in the spring. Their head coach comes in, takes over. Their head coach leaves. Sean Elliott left 2 days into spring practice, and now they get a brand new head coach come in. They lost some players to the portal. It's a first-year head coach, new offensive system, new defensive system, playing in the tough Sun Belt Conference. Scratching my head at 4.5. I've got them a lot lower than that.
Okay, under 4.5 there on Georgia State. And then who are you maybe a little higher on?
A lot higher on. That would be Iowa. Iowa's total is 7.5. And a lot of folks are, when you don't follow college football, you can knee jerk to some reactions. Oh, Iowa's not playing in the West anymore, so they're going to be tougher scheduled. They're not getting to play in the Big Ten West. But guess what? They avoid Michigan, they avoid Oregon, they avoid Penn State. So it's like they're playing in the West. Their toughest game is at Ohio State this year. All the other games I've got them favored. Why? Well, I had thought that Nick Jackson, Jay Higgins, and Sebastian Castro would all leave early for the NFL at linebacker. They all came back. So they have the number 2 defense in the country. Special teams, always great with Iowa, number 10. Offensive line, vastly improved. Best offensive line in 4 years. They've got Williams and Johnson at running back, and improved receiving core. And whether it's Cade McNamara or Brendan Sullivan that wins that starting quarterback job, they're in great shape. So an improved offense, great defense, special teams. And then, Matt, when you get a chance, look at their schedule and find me 5 losses on there, because I got 1. I got at Ohio State. Other than that, I'm favored in all the other games. Over 7.5 on Iowa.
Phil, I've learned this long enough doing this with you that's about gospel for you. When we're looking at the preseason totals, if you like a way over Iowa at 7.5, I'll be riding with you right there. Yeah, I'm looking at it. Illinois State, Iowa State, Troy, Minnesota, Ohio State, Washington, Michigan State, Northwestern, Wisconsin, UCLA, Maryland, Nebraska. That's why you're the best. All right, so we'll keep an eye on that. Last thing for you, Phil. Let me ask you about Brian Kelly, year 3. Year 3 at Notre Dame is when they went undefeated and played Alabama for the national championship. In his history, he's been really good in his 3rd season at places. A lot of expectation on this LSU team year 3 with Brian Kelly to get over that 9-3 hump. Vegas has him 9.5 over/under. What's your thought on Brian Kelly and the Tigers year 3?
Yeah, to me, they're a completely a wild card team. There's a lot of toss-up games on the schedule this year. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games that are all within a touchdown, probably within 4 or 5 points. So I think we're going to learn a lot about LSU. Can the defense be as improved as I think it will this year? Can the offense not take as big a drop-off, losing a quarterback, a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback, losing the top rusher, losing 2 first-round draft picks? Will that offensive line take over? It's just a schedule with a lot of toss-up games on it. The Ole Miss game at home, playing Oklahoma at home, at Florida in the Swamp's always tough, Alabama at home. I could see them over. I could see them under. It's one of those teams where I'm going to get the popcorn and see how the season goes.
Well, we'll start that on September the 1st out in Las Vegas against USC. That'll be a lot of fun. We'll look forward to being there. And, Phil, we're going to look forward to talking to you every Friday throughout the season, man. It's always our pleasure to have you. We can't thank you enough for the time, and looking forward to it. What's that going to be? I guess Friday, August the 30th? Will that be our first, or will we go week 0?
Let's go week 0. What the heck? It's Matt Moscona. How can I not come on?
If Phil Steele says we're going week 0, we're going week 0. All right, Phil, you're the best. Thanks as always, man. We appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.